The Giza necropolis, which consists of 3 great pyramids guarded by the Sphinx, is the last remaining of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The original purpose of the complex is still debated by historians, as is the connection of the 3 pyramids to each other and to the Sphinx.
There is no question in my mind, and in the mind of many researchers, that the Giza necropolis is a planned project. It isn't just pharaohs who came and put their pyramids haphazardly and then built the Sphinx. The geometry of the site makes it very unlikely that it's not a designed project.
Is it possible that the Sphinx and the pyramids were designed to function together? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and suggest a recently unearthed tomb could provide proof. Just 200 feet from the Sphinx, in a causeway connecting the second pyramid to its temple complex, is an entrance to what is believed to be the ceremonial burial chamber of the god Osiris. The Osiris shaft was first unearthed in 1934, but only fully explored in 1999.
This place has not been visited much. It's probably been visited only a handful of times since 1999. Right here is the first level. The first level is not that deep.
The Osiris shaft actually consists of 3 different shafts that descend to 3 separate chambers. The final chamber is buried nearly 10 stories underground and contains what some say is a sarcophagus of Osiris.
Here we are, 100 feet deep, the 3rd and final chamber in the Osiris shaft. And here's the sarcophagus right in front of me. This is only the lid of the sarcophagus. The body of the sarcophagus is under the water, and it's at least 3 times the size of the lid. And to the 4 corners of the island, there were 4 pillars that are now nearly completely destroyed. The 4 had hieroglyphic inscriptions on them, some of which read, God Osiris, the god of the underground.
While most scholars believe Osiris to be a mythical being and his tomb merely symbolic, ancient astronaut theorists suggest that not only was Osiris real, but this 9-foot sarcophagus offers evidence of extraterrestrial intervention in the remote past.
The word sarcophagus means flesh eater. And this is like a giant black box. Flesh and blood being goes into the box, is sealed in it, the box consumes them, and the body disappears.
The idea of a sarcophagus that has no actual mummy or body in it suggests the possibility of teleportation and the possibility of the transmutation of the physical body. It is a suggestion, perhaps, that those who built that monument and those underground rooms could completely portal out of our reality entirely.
Giza Plateau, Egypt, 2008. Researchers from the University of the Aegean and the University of Athens perform a study on the stones used for many of the region's ancient monuments. What they discover is that most of these structures, including the Giza pyramids, contain hundreds of thousands of marine fossils. The find intensifies the debate between archaeologists who suggest that the blocks used to build the pyramids were cast like concrete versus those who say they were carved out of natural stone. But for ancient astronaut theorists, it raises another question. Is it possible that the pyramids were not built with stone that had at one time been submerged beneath the ocean, but that the pyramids themselves were underwater?
Right in the middle of the desert, seemingly out of nowhere, we have fossils from the ocean, different genres of marine organisms. Where did they come from? And why are they here? Some say that a great flood did in fact happen, that it was real.
The flood is clearly presented as being sent with intent as an attack upon the earth. Powers that be, they had an intent and a purpose for experiment Earth, which they believe had become corrupted, and therefore the flood was sent as an attack, an assault upon humanity.
These gods were going to artificially create this flood and cataclysm with their super technology. And who could do that except for extraterrestrials?
According to the Bible, God sent the great flood to cleanse the earth because of the sinful state of mankind. But if the flood really was sent by extraterrestrials, as some ancient astronaut theorists suggest, might it also have been an attempt to eliminate any trace of the advanced civilization that existed here on Earth in the distant past? Is it possible that the secrets of the pyramids were initially covered up not by humans, but by an alien race that lived among us thousands of years ago?
One has to ask the question, well, what was wiped out? Could it be that it was an incredibly advanced society that existed before recorded history?
Many new pyramid structures have been found. You have pyramids off the coast of Cuba and 2,000 feet of water. So who built those structures? How did they get there?
Researcher Frank Joseph has actually found remnants of at least 10 pyramid-shaped structures beneath the surface of the water in Rock Lake, Wisconsin. 2 of these pyramids have actually been explored by scuba divers and mapped out through the use of sonar, which is how we figure out where things are in a deep body of water.
The presence of man-made pyramids at the bottom of Rock Lake, Wisconsin, much like the structures that have been found in China, Alaska, Bosnia, and off the coast of Japan and Cuba, is something that government officials continue to deny.
But the government has gone out of their way to try to dismiss the idea that these are pyramids. And they won't even give you a good answer. But the answer really is that they don't want people to make this connection, that we have pyramids in our country and that they're connected to pyramids all over the world.
Are we living at a time where keeping things like underground pyramids is considered a national security threat to our government if the truth is told? I hope that is not the case. And if there are pyramids that could be linked together, give this planet energy, then let's move on with getting past all these policies of denial, and let's find this pyramid in Alaska and wherever else they are on the planet.
The Giza Necropolis, Egypt, 1993. A team of engineers uses a remotely operated camera in an attempt to discover the true function of what is believed to be an air shaft leading from the supposed Queen's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. First discovered in 1872, archaeologists long considered these narrow tunnels to be ventilation ducts.
This robot traveled up this small shaft, which was too small for a human or any type of device to go through. And all of a sudden it finds a closed door, hinged by 2 little metal clamps.
According to mainstream archaeologists, the door and metal handles were intentionally built as a symbolic passageway that the Queen would travel through to the afterlife. But some researchers have questioned why this passageway would have been designed with a deliberate blockage. And why, on a plateau filled with monumental pyramids, believed to serve as royal tombs, is the Great Pyramid the only one with such a door?
Egyptologists are very much fond of saying that pyramids are tombs and that they have been robbed at some point in the past. But the fact is that we have found in the 20th century a number of pyramids whose central king's chamber, so to speak, is intact. And when they opened the sarcophagus, they found that sarcophagus to be empty as well.
If the Great Pyramid was not a tomb, what may have been its true purpose? In May 2011, another team of researchers set out to further explore the blocked air shaft in the Queen's Chamber. This time, the crew used a robot equipped with a microsnake camera to slip through a hole and reveal what was beyond the door.
When they actually penetrated this small door, they found a hidden room within the pyramid.
What they found was copper fittings, or the metal fittings. Another feature of the back of these metal fittings was that on one side, the loop looked like it was corroded. The camera also looked down and scanned the floor. What we saw was red markings. My interpretation of those were, they were electrical symbols, but why were they there?
Could these artifacts be actual evidence that electricity once coursed through the structure? And if so, could the Great Pyramid of Giza have been built to serve as not a royal tomb, but a power plant, as some researchers contend?
If we dismiss the tomb theory and we look at the pyramid itself, we see something that modern engineers can really tune into and understand. What we have is a very, very precise building that has the precision of a fraction of an inch. Is something that is very noteworthy and not indicative of a simple agrarian culture. So what we have is something that is almost like a machine.
Giza, Egypt. On the western bank of the Nile River stands a marvel of ancient engineering, the Great Pyramid. The largest structure in the Giza Pyramid complex stands roughly 450 feet tall and consists of over 2 million stone blocks, some of which are made from the same red granite that was used to create the obelisks throughout the country. While Egyptologists believe that it was built around 2570 BC with earthen ramps, ropes, and pulleys, definitive proof of how it was constructed and how old the giant structure is remains a mystery.
Great Pyramid of Giza is a marvel of architecture. Every block was 5 tons, and there's about 2 million of them to create a perfect pyramid shape that is one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, the most ancient one of them all, and the only one standing.
The Great Pyramid of Giza covers 13 acres. It's a very remarkable building. The precision of this building exceeds anything that we require of builders today. For instance, the area over 13 acres was leveled within 7/8 of an inch. That's about the thickness of a thumbnail. The casing stones are joined line to line to within 0.010 of an inch, and the joints are filled with some kind of mysterious cement that nobody's been able to figure out what the formula is. This is not the work of primitive people who have copper chisels.
Inside the Great Pyramid are a number of fascinating chambers and corridors, like the Grand Gallery, this towering stairway that goes up into the so-called King's Chamber.
Mainstream scholars theorize that the Great Pyramid was built as a tomb for the pharaoh Khufu, who reigned from 2589 to 2566 BC. But archaeologists have yet to find any human remains or authentic grave markers within the structure. The design of the tunnel system and chamber rooms within the Great Pyramid have convinced engineering expert Chris Dunn that the true purpose of the massive structure was to act as a power plant, distributing energy through obelisks.
We're taught in school that the Great Pyramid is a tomb, but if you look at the complexity of these buildings, the precision with which they were built, the features that you see on the inside, these various shafts and passageways, for me it looks like a machine.
With more than 50 years of experience in the aerospace industry, Dunn believes that chemical reactions took place within the Great Pyramid that generated electromagnetic waves.
You have two shafts leading into the Queen's Chamber, and these shafts delivered the chemicals to the chamber that they would mix and boil off hydrogen, and then the hydrogen would pass through another passageway to the Grand Gallery, and then into the King's Chambers.
Dunn speculates that once the hydrogen gas reached the King's Chamber, vibrations energized and converted the hydrogen atoms into microwaves.
You have evidence to support the theory that hydrogen was being fed down the northern shaft, which leads to the King's Chamber, and then it enters the chamber and collects the energy that has accumulated in that chamber, and then directs it through the southern shaft for the microwaves to spread out. So that energy would reach large distances. And I think if you had an obelisk at any distance, it could actually affect that particular structure.
The Great Pyramid is itself a power generator, and that energy is broadcast from the pyramid. It's picked up by the transmitters, which are the obelisks, placed at key sites, made of red granite that are able to be tuned to the specific frequencies coming from the pyramid.
Amarna, Egypt, 1891. Italian archaeologist Alessandro Barsante explores the tomb constructed for the pharaoh Akhenaten, but finds no evidence of his mummy.
What's really interesting is that the Egyptologists were certain that they would find Akhenaten behind that tomb, and they didn't.
Just what happened to this revolutionary leader after his death is as mysterious as the pharaoh himself. Was he never actually buried in his tomb, or could he have been removed? Akhenaten ruled from 1353 BC until his death 17 years later. His reign was dominated by controversy when he abandoned the pantheon of old Egyptian gods and instead demanded that his subjects worship the sun god Aten.
The Aten was something that he saw in the sky between two mountains that inspired him to create the sacred city of Amarna. Now, the typical view is the Aten must be the sun, but it is entirely possible that what Akhenaten was seeing was in fact an extraterrestrial flying craft.
Did Akhenaten uproot the entire kingdom of Egypt because of an extraterrestrial encounter? Or could there be an even more profound explanation?
If you compare images of Akhenaten to other depictions of pharaohs, you'll notice that Akhenaten looks very different. He had this very bizarre, elongated skull, and he had this weird pot belly and weird arms. So, was he really a human? Perhaps Akhenaten was not of this earth.
While archaeologists have yet to uncover the remains of Akhenaten, ancient astronaut theorists believe that depictions of him having an elongated skull could be more than just artistic license, because there are other mummies that do, in fact, have unusual skulls. Some elongated skulls can be explained by the fact that numerous ancient cultures practiced head binding, a form of body modification where the heads of infants were tightly bound to force their skulls to become conical in shape. But several misshapen skulls appear to defy explanation. In Peru and Malta, elongated skulls have been discovered that are mysteriously missing a sagittal suture, the fibrous jagged joint found in all human skulls.
When you compare some of these elongated skulls, some have sutures like we have as humans, and then there are other skulls that do not have the same sutures. So is it possible that some of them are of actual extraterrestrial origin? It would not surprise me in the least bit. In the least bit.
The Giza Plateau, Egypt, 1925. Rising out of the desert sand is a giant stone statue of a human head. For centuries, most visitors to the area believed this was all that existed. But French engineer Emile Barrès is convinced that much more lies beneath the surface than even archaeologists are aware of. He begins an excavation to uncover it, and after 11 years of extensive digging, Barrès unearths a massive body resembling a lion and reintroduces the world to the full splendor of the Great Sphinx. It is the largest monolithic sculpture on Earth.
It must have been quite eerie to be there back then, not knowing a lot about the ancient Egyptian history, and having this huge structure staring down at you.
Facing east toward the rising sun, the Great Sphinx is located nearly half a mile from Egypt's 3 largest pyramids. It is carved from a single piece of limestone bedrock and stands over 60 feet tall and 240 feet long.
People have asked themselves for centuries, what was the Sphinx for? Why was it built? There is a story behind it, but what is the story?
The Sphinx is arguably one of the most studied monuments in the world. Yet it remains one of the most mysterious. There are no inscriptions on the Sphinx to indicate who built it or why. But most Egyptologists date it to 2500 BC, the time of the pharaoh Khafre, or Khephren, as he is known by Greek scholars. The dating is based on a mention of Khafre on a tablet found between the paws of the Sphinx. But this tablet, known as the Dream Stela, also tells the story of a pharaoh who came 1,000 years later, King Thutmose IV.
King Thutmose IV comes in the New Kingdom, which we believe is more than 1,000 years after the time the Sphinx was sculpted. He made this stela to tell his story. King Thutmose IV, before becoming a king, was on an expedition here in Giza. And he slept right next to the Sphinx. And back then the Sphinx was covered in sand all the way up to its head. And in his dream, the Sphinx came to him.
The Sphinx spoke to him and said that if he would uncover the Sphinx from the burial in sand, he would then end up as Pharaoh. Now, he was the son of a Pharaoh, but was not the heir. Thutmose IV ended up with that throne after this dream. The Sphinx itself speaks to a future pharaoh, and the history of ancient Egypt is altered by this fact.
The Sphinx told King Thutmose IV in his sleep, right here in that line, that everything that the eye of the Lord illuminates will be his. He cleared all the sand surrounding the Sphinx, and Thutmose IV then became the king. So the Sphinx kept its promise.
Now, the amazing thing about this is that we learn of what's called the flashing eye of the Lord. What is the flashing eye of the Lord? This sounds like some kind of technology that is in communication with the Sphinx, or perhaps channeled by the Sphinx, that could ensure the prosperity of Thutmose IV.
If the story on the dream stela is true, the Sphinx not only ensured the prosperity of Thutmose IV, but of perhaps the most important dynastic family in the history of the Egyptian Empire.
Thutmose IV was actually the grandfather of Akhenaten.
Akhenaten was considered a heretical pharaoh. He changed the polytheistic religion of ancient Egypt and declared there was only one god, Aten, a god he depicted as a disk in the sky.
Akhenaten became enthralled with the Aten disk. Is it possible that the eye of the Lord and the Aten disk are one and the same, and that they are, in fact, some kind of UFO spaceship that's hovering over Egypt as an eye in the sky and is guiding the Egyptian civilization?
The Valley of the Kings. Located on the western bank of the Nile River, lies one of the most expansive burial grounds in all of Egypt. The tombs were constructed between 1539 and 1075 BC for pharaohs and other nobility. To date, 63 tombs have been discovered in the Valley of the Kings. One of the best preserved is that of Pharaoh Ramses VI, who ruled from approximately 1145 to 1137 BC.
More than 4,000 years ago, King Ramesses would have started digging this to become his tomb, or as he called it, his house of eternity. For ancient Egyptians, a tomb wasn't just a place where they would end up dead. A tomb was a place where they would start their eternal life.
The Egyptians believed that in death, the soul would split into several parts and begin the journey to the afterlife. But to make this transition, it was essential to reunite the soul with the physical body. And while the Egyptians were not the first to mummify their dead, no other ancient culture went to such great lengths to preserve the body and ensure entrance into the next life.
Ancient Egyptians would put a body that needed to be mummified in a dry room. And they would first take out the internal organs, and they'd pack that body with natron salt to start the drying process. And then they would remove the brain. And then they would rinse the body with sweet-smelling oils, and they cover the entire body in natron salt, and it would stay that way for about 35 to 70 days. Once the body was all dried out, they would wrap the entire body, putting amulets and other special jeweled objects in the linen, and then once it was completely wrapped, and be done.
The Egyptians understood the most important factor in mummification, the removal of fluids, which ensures that bacteria cannot survive and the body will not decay. Although archaeologists have discovered much about how these mummies were prepared, the Egyptians left behind no texts or instructions on mummification. Just how the Egyptians came to create this complex practice remains a mystery. But they did leave behind extensive records regarding their thoughts on the afterlife.
This right here is a very good depiction of the journey of the afterlife with King Ramesses. You see him here on a solar barge, being protected by all the different gods behind him, Goddess Isis and Goddess Osiris. This right here is God Anubis. And God Anubis is the god of the mummification.
The most important story in Egyptian mythology is the god Osiris, how his brother Set coveted his brother's power and killed him. Then his wife Isis, in grief, got help from Anubis, who then helped Isis breathe life back into him to survive into the next life, with the help of Anubis, the inventor of embalming and mummification.
The mummification process in Egypt has often been related to the star Sirius, which we call the dog star. And the mummification rites were overseen by the Egyptian god Anubis, who was a jackal-headed god. And so you have to wonder if Anubis wasn't some real physical extraterrestrial god.
The ancient Egyptian temple walls are covered with images of transformation. And what it reveals is that their core sacred science was about human transformation or ascension into celestial beings. So you wonder, is it possible it's because those who originally taught us the concept came from the stars?
As ancient Egypt grew into a great civilization, its citizens believed their pharaohs were sons of Osiris, and thus living gods. Artwork and wall carvings depicted them as perfect humans. And while the people worshipped many different gods, the pharaoh stood above them all. This basic Egyptian religious belief remained in force for nearly 1,000 years, until one pharaoh changed everything. Who was this heretic? His name was Akhenaten, and in every surviving depiction he is shown with an elongated skull. Who was he? According to Egyptian mythology, he too was descended from the gods who arrived on Earth at the time of Tepsepi. But why do so many still believe he actually came from the stars? In 1352 BC, Akhenaten ascended to the throne as the 10th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. Almost immediately, he instituted a series of radical religious changes, including a ban on references to multiple gods.
It's a rather strange thing that he would want to do that in one sweep, but he ordered all the iconography of previous gods to be removed. He only allowed one emblem, which was the sun emblem, literally a sun disk with curious arms or rays pouring down.
Why did he do this? Because according to his writings and his poems that were written about him later on, he was visited by one of those beings that descended from the sky, who told Akhenaten, "This is the way. I am your god."
This sun god was known as Aten. Akhenaten claimed to be a direct descendant of Aten.
Akhenaten, like any other pharaoh, regarded himself to be divine. He was a god. Not only himself believed himself to be God, but the whole nation saw him as a god. The definition of God is that he was a descendant from these celestial beings.
During his 4th year as pharaoh, Akhenaten ordered the construction of a new capital city. He called it Amarna and dedicated it to the sun. Akhenaten would spend the next 10 years here. during which time he instituted changes in both art and culture, including how he himself would be publicly depicted.
In Egyptian iconography, Egyptian pharaohs are depicted as these triangular-shaped beings, these broad, strong shoulders and these very skinny waists. Now, we look at leaders today and we know that most leaders don't have broad shoulders and skinny waists. But it was important to depict the Egyptian kings as having broad shoulders and skinny waists, very, the epitome of what a king ought to look like.
That's exactly the opposite with Akhenaten. He shows himself perhaps as he really is, a rather strange look. He has a very mystical look.
If we take Akhenaten's statues, for instance, literally, he was a very strange-looking character. Sort of combined, some people would say, feminine aspects with masculine aspects, may have had an elongated skull.
The change in royal iconography of Akhenaten showed him as he probably really was, with a misshapen head, with a pot belly, with a sunken chest, as opposed to the idealized iconography of traditional Egyptian artists that show this big, strong pharaoh.
Akhenaten's wife, Queen Nefertiti, and their children were also depicted as having elongated skulls. So why were Akhenaten's and Nefertiti's heads deformed? Did they suffer from a genetic abnormality? Or did they deliberately alter their shape? Some believe there could be yet another explanation behind their strange, otherworldly appearance.
They look like they're different than other human beings.
Is it possible that Akhenaten might have been an extraterrestrial hybrid?
Ancient alien enthusiasts look at Pharaoh Akhenaten of Egypt and say, look at that long head. That looks like an alien gray. That looks like some kind of something that's non-human, or some hybrid between something else and something human. Must be evidence of alien interference, alien reproduction with humans, something like that.
I've been to Egypt, and one of the most stunning things about seeing the archaeological remains of ancient Egypt is that one unique pharaoh, Akhenaten.
I mean, he's got a very narrow, pointy face, high cheekbones, and a very elongated cranium.
The idea that they were either looking like extraterrestrials or perhaps had extraterrestrial DNA in them is a credible idea.